"Don't do that, please," the mountain man begged as the nun lifted a stone to end her Nancy. The mountain was quiet that morning, wrapped in a soft mist that clung to the trees and rocks like a thin veil. The sun, just beginning to rise, cast gentle golden light across the peaks, turning the rugged landscape into something almost magical. Birds sang in the distance, their calls echoing softly through the valleys, and the faint sound of running water trickled from a hidden stream somewhere uphill. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow, where the world's noise faded away, leaving only the rhythm of nature. In this solitude lived Joseph. He was a man of the mountains, born and raised among the high cliffs and winding trails that few others dared to tread. His skin was weathered, tanned by the sun, and lined with the kind of wrinkles that only come from a life spent outdoors, working with one's hands. His eyes, sharp and steady, had seen storms that tore trees from the ground and winters so harsh that the snow would pile higher than a man's head. Despite the solitude, Joseph was not lonely. He had his cabin, his animals, and the mountains themselves, which spoke to him in whispers of wind and rustling leaves. Joseph's cabin was small but sturdy, built of thick logs he had cut and assembled himself. Smoke always rose from the chimney in the early morning, carrying the comforting scent of wood fire. Inside, it was warm, filled with the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the small windows. On the shelves were jars of dried herbs and roots, carefully labeled, and on the walls hung simple tools for farming and cooking. There was a sense of order here, a rhythm to life that Joseph understood and cherished. That morning he had just finished tending to his small garden, checking each plant carefully. The frost had been heavy overnight, and he wanted to make sure nothing was damaged. His hands, strong and calloused, moved quickly and confidently, brushing soil off leaves and straightening bent stems. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth. Joseph breathed deeply, enjoying the calm before the day truly began. As he worked, he noticed something unusual. A figure was moving along the narrow trail that wound through the trees, a woman carrying a small bundle close to her chest. She walked carefully, her steps tentative, as though unsure of the path. Joseph squinted against the morning sun. He did not expect visitors here. The mountains were rarely traveled, and he knew almost everyone in the nearby villages by sight. Yet here was someone he did not recognize. The woman was dressed modestly in a long dress, simple but neat, and a scarf covered her head. There was something different about her presence, a kind of quiet urgency, like she was carrying more than just the bundle in her arms. Joseph watched silently from a distance, unsure what to do. His life had taught him caution. The mountains were beautiful, but they were also dangerous, and strangers could bring trouble. Still, there was something in her movement that drew him in. She seemed tired, worn from travel, yet determined. There was no haste, but a careful persistence, as if she had a purpose she could not ignore. Joseph felt a mixture of curiosity and concern. Normally, he would not interfere, but something told him this encounter was different. As the woman approached closer, she stumbled on a loose stone, and Joseph's instinct kicked in. He stepped out from behind the trees, calling softly. "Are you all right?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and relief. She nodded quickly but did not speak. Joseph walked toward her slowly, hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. "You shouldn't be here alone. The path is not safe." She hesitated, then whispered, I need shelter." "Please," her voice was quiet, trembling, but there was a sincerity to it that Joseph could not ignore. He studied her for a moment, noting the bundle she carried. It was small and wrapped tightly, but he could not see what was inside. He said nothing, simply gesturing toward his cabin. The woman glanced at the cabin in the distance, nestled among the trees, smoke curling from its chimney. Relief washed over her face, and she nodded. Joseph led the way, moving carefully down the trail. The woman followed, her steps slow but steady. They walked in silence, the only sounds the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the occasional bird call. When they reached the cabin, Joseph opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "You can rest here," he said simply. "I have food and fire. You can stay as long as you need." The woman stepped inside cautiously, looking around. Her eyes widened slightly at the warmth and comfort of the cabin. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She placed the bundle down carefully on a chair and sank onto a stool, her hands clasped tightly together. Joseph observed her quietly, giving her space. He prepared a small meal. heating water and slicing bread from a loaf he had baked the day before. He set it on the table and gestured for her to eat. She nodded gratefully, picking up the bread with shaky hands. For a few moments they sat in silence, the quiet only broken by the crackle of the fire. Finally, she spoke. "I am Sister Agnes," she said softly. I didn't know where else to go." Joseph nodded slowly. "I am Joseph," he replied. "This is my home. You are welcome here, but you must tell me why you are out here alone." Agnes hesitated, her eyes dropping to the table. I am traveling," she said carefully. "I needed a place to stay for a while." Her voice wavered, and Joseph could sense that there was more she wanted to say, but could not. He waited patiently, understanding that sometimes people could not speak their burdens immediately. The morning passed slowly, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Joseph showed her the cabin, the small garden outside, and the stream where he collected water. Agnes listened quietly, asking few questions but observing everything with careful attention. There was a sadness about her, a weight that seemed to press down on her shoulders. Joseph did not pry, knowing that trust took time. As the day wore on, the two shared simple food and conversation. Joseph spoke of the mountains, of the animals and plants he cared for, and of the storms he had weathered over the years. Agnes listened, sometimes smiling faintly and occasionally asking questions about his life. There was a gentleness to her, a kindness that Joseph noticed. She was cautious but sincere, and in her presence the cabin felt less lonely. By evening the sun was low, casting long shadows across the mountains. Agnes sat near the fire, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea. Joseph watched her from across the room, still unsure of how much to trust her, yet feeling a strange sense of responsibility. He had lived in the mountains for years, alone and content, but this woman had stirred something in him he had not felt for a long time, the desire to protect and help someone in need. "Why are you traveling alone?" he asked finally, his voice gentle. "The mountains are not safe for one person." Agnes looked down at her hands, her eyes glistening. I have reasons," she said softly, "reasons I cannot explain yet, but I needed to find a place somewhere to be safe." Joseph nodded, understanding more than she realized. Sometimes people carried burdens that were too heavy to share immediately. He did not press further. Instead, he offered her a blanket and a place to rest for the night. "You can stay here," he said. "No one will harm you here. You are safe." Agnes accepted, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you for your kindness." That night, as the wind howled gently through the trees and the fire crackled in the cabin, both Joseph and Agnes lay awake for a while. He thought of the mountains, of the quiet and solitude he had always cherished, and of the unexpected presence of this stranger in his life. She thought of the long journey that had brought her here, of the safety she had finally found, and of the uncertainty that still lay ahead. Outside, the mountains remained silent and imposing, but inside the cabin there was warmth, understanding, and the beginnings of a bond between two very different lives. For Joseph, it was a reminder that even in the most isolated places, human connection could appear unexpectedly. For Agnes, it was a small hope that perhaps, for the first time in a long while, she could find comfort and protection. As the night deepened, the cabin grew quiet, and both fell into a deep, exhausted sleep, unaware of how much this chance encounter would shape the days to come. The mountains watched over them, silent and enduring, holding the promise of safety, challenge, and change in their vast, rugged embrace. The following morning, sunlight spilled gently into the cabin, warming the wooden floor and casting soft patterns across the walls. Outside, the mountains sparkled with dew, each tree and rock outlined sharply in the bright light. Joseph had already been awake for some time, tending to his chores as usual. He moved quietly, feeding the animals and checking his supplies, careful not to disturb Agnes, who had finally been able to rest after her long journey. When she emerged from the small bedroom, wrapped in a modest shawl, her eyes were weary but alert. She moved cautiously, aware of her surroundings, and Joseph noticed the careful way she carried herself, as though every step required thought and care. He offered her a cup of warm tea and a small breakfast of bread and fruit, and they ate together in quiet companionship. Words were few, but there was an understanding growing between them, a recognition that they were both adjusting to this unexpected encounter in the mountains. After breakfast, Agnes asked if she could help with small chores around the cabin. Joseph hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "If you wish," he said, There are always things to do, but take care not to overexert yourself. The mountains can be hard on the body, especially if you are not used to the work. Agnes smiled faintly and followed him outside. He showed her how to gather firewood safely, how to check the garden for any damage from frost, and how to carry water from the nearby stream. She listened carefully, asking questions and trying to absorb every detail. Though she was not strong in the ways of the mountains, she had a determination that impressed Joseph. She wanted to learn, to adapt, to survive in this isolated place, and he could see that she would not give up easily. As the day unfolded, Joseph began to notice the subtleties of her presence. She moved with a quiet grace, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily, yet always alert to the smallest changes in the environment. When a bird landed nearby, she would pause and watch silently, as if drawing strength from the calm of the mountains. Joseph found himself observing her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. She had endured hardship, he could tell, and there was a depth to her that drew him in. At midday, a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers into the cabin, and Agnes paused by the window, inhaling deeply. "It is beautiful here," she said softly, almost to herself. "So peaceful, I have never seen such mountains before." Joseph nodded, pleased to see her appreciation. "The mountains have a way of teaching patience," he said. "They do not rush, they do not demand. You learn by watching, by waiting, by listening." Agnes turned to him, her eyes thoughtful. "I think I understand that," she said. "I have been moving through life so quickly, always trying to escape. I never had the chance to stop and listen before. Here it is different." Joseph felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He had lived alone for so long, and yet her words resonated with him. Perhaps this meeting was not an interruption of his life, but a part of it, a chance to see the mountains and himself through a new perspective. The day passed in small, meaningful ways. They worked together in the garden, carried water, and tended to the animals. Agnes learned quickly, her hands growing stronger, her movements more confident. She asked questions about the plants and the animals, and Joseph answered patiently, sharing knowledge he had gathered over years of living in isolation. He told her about the seasons, about which herbs could be used for remedies, and which plants were safest to eat. Agnes listened carefully, her mind absorbing every detail, her spirit quietly strengthening. By late afternoon, the work was done, and they sat outside on the cabin's small wooden porch. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, golden and green in the fading sunlight. Agnes looked out over the valleys, her expression distant, thoughtful. Joseph sensed that she carried a burden far heavier than the work of the day. He did not ask directly, knowing she would reveal her thoughts when she was ready. Instead, he spoke gently, almost to fill the silence. "The mountains have a way of showing what is important," he said. "They remind us that life can be hard, but it is also full of beauty and moments worth holding on to." Agnes turned to him, her eyes glistening. I have done things in my life I regret," she said softly. "I have carried shame and fear for a long time. I wanted to hide, to disappear, because I thought that was the only way to be safe." Joseph nodded slowly. "We all carry burdens," he said. "Some are easier to see than others, some heavier than we can imagine, but carrying them alone makes them heavier still. Sharing them, even a little, can lighten the load." She looked at him, her lips trembling slightly, and for a moment neither spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the mountains stood silent and unwavering around them. There was a strange comfort in that silence, a reminder that life, no matter how difficult, continued forward. As the evening deepened, the sky painted itself in shades of pink and orange. Agnes moved to the porch railing, leaning slightly as she watched the sun sink behind the distant peaks. "I have a secret," she said quietly, "something I have never told anyone." Joseph's gaze met hers, steady and patient. "You can tell me," he said. "You are safe here." She hesitated, swallowing hard. "I am expecting a child," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, carried away slightly by the breeze, but Joseph heard her clearly. For a moment, Joseph said nothing. He felt the weight of her words, the care and fear in her tone. This was not just a casual secret. It was something that had shaped her journey, driven her into the mountains, and brought her to his cabin. He recognized the courage it had taken to speak, and he did not judge, only listened. "You came all this way, seeking safety," he said gently. "I understand why. The world can be harsh, and sometimes it is easier to hide than to face it. But you are here now, and you are not alone. We will find a way through this together." Agnes looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and apprehension. I don't know what to do, she admitted. I am afraid of what people will say, what they will think. I wanted to leave everything behind to escape. Joseph nodded. Fear is natural, he said. It shows that you care about what matters, but running from fear does not solve it. Sometimes facing it, even a little at a time, is the only way to move forward. They sat in silence for a while, the mountains around them glowing in the last light of day. Joseph thought about how much her presence had already changed the rhythm of his life, and how he had already come to care for her well-being. Agnes, in turn, felt a cautious sense of hope. For the first time in a long time, she felt that she could trust someone, that she could find support instead of hiding alone. As night fell, Joseph lit the fire inside the cabin, and Agnes helped to prepare a simple dinner. They ate quietly, the soft crackle of the fire filling the room. Afterward, they cleaned the dishes together, and Joseph showed her how to store food for the coming days, how to prepare simple meals from what the mountains provided. Agnes listened attentively, her hands moving carefully, showing a growing confidence in her abilities. Later, as they settled down for the night, Agnes spoke again, her voice soft but steady. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, she said. But I feel safer here than anywhere I have been. I think I might be able to face the world again if I have someone to guide me. Joseph smiled gently. You are not alone, he said. The mountains can teach many things, but they cannot replace human connection. That is something we give each other by being patient, by listening, and by caring. That night, as the stars glittered above the mountains and the cabin glowed warmly in the darkness, both Joseph and Agnes felt a quiet shift. The mountains had always been a place of solitude and endurance, but now they were also a place of understanding and beginnings. Each had come to the mountains carrying their own burdens, but together they had found a small measure of peace and hope. Joseph lay awake for a while, thinking about the path ahead. He knew that life outside the mountains could be difficult for Agnes, that challenges awaited her, and yet he also knew that she was strong, capable, and determined. Agnes, in turn, felt a growing sense of courage. She realized that she did not have to face her fears alone, that someone had extended a hand in a world where she had expected only judgment and rejection. The night passed quietly, with only the soft sounds of the wind and distant animals. By morning, both were ready to face the day, knowing that their journey in the mountains was just beginning, and that the bond they had formed in this small cabin would help guide them through the challenges yet to come. The morning sun broke over the mountain peaks, casting long golden streaks across the valley below. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine and wildflowers. Joseph had already begun his daily routine, quietly moving around the cabin, feeding the animals, and tending to his small garden. Agnes stirred slowly in the other room, her mind heavy with thoughts she could no longer ignore. The past days had been peaceful in their own way, filled with quiet labor, small conversations, and shared meals. Yet beneath the calm, a tension had been growing inside Agnes. She had arrived at the cabin with a burden she had tried to hide, a weight that pressed on her heart and mind. Even though Joseph had been kind, patient, and understanding, she could not shake the fear and uncertainty that had driven her into the mountains in the first place. She moved outside, carrying a small bundle of herbs she had collected from the mountainside. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked along the narrow path that led to the stream. Joseph noticed her from the porch and followed quietly, giving her space but remaining near enough to watch over her. He could sense that she was struggling with something deep and personal, something she had not yet shared, and he wanted to be there for her without pressuring her to speak before she was ready. Agnes paused at a flat stone by the stream and knelt, washing the herbs in the clear, cold water. Her reflection shimmered on the surface, and for a moment she simply stared at it. The face looking back at her was tired, marked by worry and fear, yet there was also a quiet strength that surprised her. She realized she had endured far more than she had ever admitted, and she had survived. The thought was both comforting and frightening. Joseph stepped closer but did not speak immediately. He watched her silently, sensing the struggle within her. Finally, he spoke gently, his voice calm and steady. You have been carrying a heavy burden, he said. You do not have to face it alone. Agnes looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty and fear. I do not know what to do, she whispered. I have carried this for so long and I thought I could manage alone, but the truth is I feel lost. I feel as if I am standing at the edge of something I cannot face. Joseph nodded, understanding more than she realized. Sometimes facing our fears is the hardest thing we can do, he said. But running from them does not make them disappear. It only makes them grow stronger. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and for a long moment she simply sat by the stream, listening to the gentle flow of the water. Her thoughts raced, memories of the past mingling with fears of the future. She had made many choices, some she regretted, some she could not change, but she had also survived, and survival required courage. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I thought I had to make a choice alone. I thought no one could understand, no one could help. I considered doing something irreversible because I felt trapped and afraid. Joseph's eyes softened. He took a careful step closer, maintaining a respectful distance. You were afraid, he said. Fear can make us think we have no options, that the only way forward is the hardest way, but there are always other paths, even if they are not immediately clear. Agnes lowered her gaze, tears forming in her eyes. I did not want to hurt anyone, she whispered. I only wanted to protect myself from the shame and the fear, but now I feel as if I have no strength left. Joseph knelt beside her, speaking gently. You have strength, he said. You survived the journey to this place, you faced your fears to arrive here, and you spoke your truth. That is courage, that is strength, and you do not have to face the rest alone. For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the stream and the distant calls of birds. The mountains stood around them, steady and unmoving, as if witnessing the struggle and the courage unfolding below. Agnes felt a small but growing sense of relief. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she did not have to carry her burden alone. Yet the fear remained, subtle but persistent. She could not ignore it. The thought of the decisions she had considered still haunted her, and she knew that facing them required more than courage, it required trust. She looked at Joseph, seeing not just a man who had offered shelter, but someone who could help her navigate the path forward. I am afraid, she admitted softly. Afraid of what comes next, afraid of facing the world, afraid of myself. Joseph nodded. Fear is part of life, he said. It tells us what matters. It shows us the value of what we hold close, but fear does not have to control us. We can act in spite of it, and we can choose a different path. Agnes listened, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. They were simple, but they carried a truth she had long avoided. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I want to try, she said quietly. I want to find a way through this, but I do not know how. I feel as if I am standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a place I cannot see clearly. Joseph placed a hand gently on her shoulder, offering support without pressure. You do not have to leap alone, he said. I will be here. Step by step, we will find a way. The path may be uncertain, but you are not alone. Agnes nodded, a small but determined gesture. She felt the tension in her body ease slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. For the first time in many days, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she was not running from fear, where she could find safety and support. The afternoon passed slowly, the sunlight shifting across the mountains as they worked together gathering firewood and preparing the cabin for the coming days. Agnes felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She still had fears, still had doubts, but for the first time she believed that she could face them. Joseph, in turn, admired her resilience and her willingness to confront the truth she had carried alone for so long. As the evening approached, the sky painted itself in deep shades of orange and pink. They sat on the porch, watching the mountains glow in the fading light. Agnes spoke again, her voice steady but soft. I think I am ready to stop hiding, she said. I want to face what I have been avoiding, but I need guidance, I need support. Joseph nodded, a quiet smile forming on his face. You have both, he said. Guidance, support, and the strength to choose your path. You have already shown courage by arriving here and speaking the truth. The night fell, and the stars appeared one by one, glittering above the mountains. The cabin was warm and comforting, a safe place amid the vast wilderness. Agnes felt a sense of peace she had not known in years, a quiet assurance that she could face what lay ahead with courage and support. Later, as they prepared for sleep, Agnes hesitated, then spoke again. Thank you, she whispered. For not judging me, for listening, for being here. I do not know what the future holds, but I feel less alone. Joseph nodded, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. You are never truly alone, he said. There is always someone who can help if we let them. And sometimes the mountains themselves teach us lessons about patience, resilience, and hope. Agnes lay down, her thoughts racing but her heart lighter. She realized that courage did not mean facing the world without fear, but rather acknowledging the fear and moving forward with support. The mountains, silent and eternal, seemed to echo that lesson, standing as witnesses to her courage and determination. Joseph remained awake for a while longer, thinking about the journey that had brought them together. He had lived in solitude for many years, and yet he now understood that even in the most isolated places, human connection could appear unexpectedly, bringing both challenge and hope. He felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that he could help someone in need, and that together they could face the uncertainty of the days ahead. As the night deepened, the wind whispered through the trees, and the mountains stood silently around them. Agnes and Joseph had both taken steps toward facing their fears, and though the path ahead was still uncertain, they knew they would not face it alone. In the quiet of the mountains, a bond had formed, a bond built on trust, courage, and the shared understanding of life's challenges. And as the stars continued to shine above, both felt a quiet hope, a belief that even in the most difficult times there was a way forward and that together they could find it. Morning arrived slowly in the mountains, spilling soft, golden light across the valley. The cabin, nestled among the tall pines and jagged rocks, seemed even warmer than usual, as if it had absorbed the quiet courage and hope of the people inside. Joseph moved quietly around the cabin, feeding the animals and checking the garden. Agnes, awakened by the gentle sun and the sound of birdsong, stretched and smiled faintly. She had slept well for the first time in many days, feeling safer and lighter than she had in a long while. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and damp earth. Agnes stepped outside, her eyes scanning the mountains with a sense of wonder and appreciation. The peaks rose like guardians around her, silent but steady, and for the first time she truly felt that she belonged somewhere. Joseph was already tending to the animals, his movements calm and deliberate, and she approached him with quiet confidence. "I think I am ready," she said softly, her voice carrying both determination and a hint of uncertainty. "Ready to face the days ahead, to face the future." Joseph looked at her, his eyes reflecting warmth and understanding. "You have been ready for a long time," he said gently. "You only needed to believe it yourself. The mountains can teach many lessons, but sometimes the hardest lesson is learning to trust yourself." Agnes nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. She realized that the journey she had taken, both the physical journey to the mountains and the emotional journey of confronting her fears, had prepared her to take steps she had once thought impossible. There was still uncertainty ahead, yes, but it no longer felt paralyzing. The day passed in quiet productivity. Agnes and Joseph worked together in the garden, preparing for the coming season. Agnes learned how to plant seeds carefully, how to nurture young shoots, and how to predict the best times for watering. Joseph taught her to identify the different herbs in the mountains, explaining their uses and benefits. Agnes listened attentively, her curiosity and determination shining through. She asked questions, experimented carefully, and slowly gained confidence in her abilities. As they worked, conversation flowed more easily than it had in the first days. They spoke of the mountains, of the changing seasons, and of memories from the past. Agnes shared stories from her childhood and the experiences that had shaped her, and Joseph listened patiently, never interrupting, offering gentle guidance when needed. Through their conversations, they discovered shared values: a love for the simplicity of life, a respect for nature, and a quiet determination to face challenges with patience and care. By late afternoon, they paused to rest, sitting on the cabin porch and watching the sun cast long shadows across the mountains. The colors of the sky shifted from gold to deep orange and then to soft pink, reflecting on the distant peaks and valleys. Agnes felt a sense of peace she had not known in years, a feeling of being grounded in the present rather than lost in fear or uncertainty. "I never thought I could feel this calm," she admitted, her voice quiet but sincere. "I thought I would always be running, always hiding. But here it feels as if I can breathe again." Joseph smiled. "The mountains have a way of showing us what is important," he said. "They remind us to slow down, to notice the small things, and to take care of ourselves and those around us. You have found a part of yourself here that you might have forgotten existed." Agnes nodded, absorbing his words. She realized that her time in the mountains had not only given her safety, but also a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that she could no longer hide from the world entirely, but she could face it with strength and support. And she knew that Joseph would remain a part of her life, offering guidance, friendship, and understanding. As the days passed, Agnes began to take more responsibility around the cabin. She prepared meals, cared for the animals, and tended to the garden with growing confidence. Joseph observed her quietly, proud of her progress and her determination. He noticed the subtle changes in her posture and demeanor, the way she moved with assurance, the way she smiled more freely, the way her eyes reflected hope rather than fear. One afternoon, as they worked together gathering firewood, Agnes paused and looked out over the mountains. "I think I understand now," she said thoughtfully. "Courage is not about never being afraid. It is about moving forward even when you are afraid, and it is about allowing others to help when you need it." Joseph nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "Exactly," he said. "No one can face everything alone. We are stronger together and we find strength in each other. You have shown great courage already, and the path ahead will be easier because of it." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat together by the fire inside the cabin. The flames flickered softly, casting warm light across the room. Agnes felt a quiet sense of gratitude. She had arrived at the mountains carrying fear and uncertainty, and now she felt hope, confidence, and connection. "I want to thank you," she said softly, "for welcoming me, for listening, for helping me. I do not know what I would have done without your kindness." Joseph shook his head gently. "You have helped yourself," he said. "I only offered guidance. The courage, determination, and strength have always been within you. You simply needed to see it for yourself." Agnes smiled, feeling a sense of completeness she had not known she could experience. The mountains, the cabin, the quiet days and nights, they had all played a part in helping her discover herself again. And in Joseph, she had found a friend, a mentor, and a steady presence she could trust. The following weeks passed with quiet rhythm. Agnes and Joseph continued their work around the cabin, tending to the garden, gathering firewood, and caring for the animals. They shared meals, stories, and laughter. Agnes practiced her skills, learning how to prepare meals from the herbs and vegetables she had grown, how to navigate the mountain paths safely, and how to make the cabin comfortable for both of them. One morning, Agnes ventured further into the mountains, guided by Joseph's instructions. She moved carefully but confidently, noticing the beauty of the world around her, the way sunlight danced on leaves, the song of a distant bird, the sparkle of a stream in the valley below. She realized how much she had grown in courage, patience, and awareness. The mountains had taught her to trust herself, to move forward even when she felt uncertain, and to accept support when it was offered. When she returned to the cabin, Joseph was waiting with a warm smile. "How was the walk?" he asked. "It was freeing," she replied. "I feel stronger, more capable, and I feel hopeful." Joseph nodded. "That is what the mountains do," he said. "They test us, teach us, and remind us that life is both beautiful and challenging. And you have learned well." As the days turned into weeks, Agnes began to consider the future beyond the mountains. She knew that she could not remain hidden forever, that the world beyond the peaks awaited her. But she no longer felt fear or dread. She had learned to face challenges, to trust in her own strength, and to accept help when it was offered. She realized that the world could be kind, and that she could navigate it with courage and wisdom. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the mountains, Agnes spoke quietly. "I know I cannot stay here forever," she said, "but I feel ready to face the world, ready to take steps I could not take before, and I know I can return here if I need guidance, support, or refuge." Joseph smiled, his eyes reflecting pride and warmth. "The mountains will always be here," he said, "and so will I in whatever way you need. You have grown stronger than you realize, and the path ahead is yours to choose." Agnes felt a deep sense of gratitude and peace. She had arrived in the mountains carrying fear and uncertainty, and now she was leaving them with courage, hope, and self-belief. She realized that the journey had not only been about finding safety, but also about discovering herself, her strength, and the power of human connection. In the quiet of the mountains, the cabin stood as a symbol of refuge and resilience. The animals moved calmly, the garden flourished, and the air carried the scent of pine and earth. Agnes and Joseph had both changed, growing stronger and more aware of the world and themselves. They had faced uncertainty, fear, and doubt, and had emerged with courage, understanding, and hope. As night fell, the stars appeared one by one, glittering above the mountains like tiny beacons of light. Agnes and Joseph sat together outside, watching the sky, feeling a sense of completion and readiness. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led them both to a place of understanding, trust, and inner strength. Agnes realized that courage was not a single act, but a series of choices, small, steady, and deliberate. It was the choice to move forward when fear whispered, the choice to accept help, and the choice to trust in oneself. She had learned that she could face challenges with patience and resilience, and that life, though uncertain, could also be beautiful and full of hope. Joseph, watching her, felt a sense of fulfillment. His years in the mountains had taught him solitude, patience, and observation, but this experience had taught him something new: how human connection could change lives, how compassion and support could transform fear into courage. He realized that even in the most remote places, bonds could form that gave strength, hope, and meaning to life. The mountains stood silently around them, enduring and steadfast. They had witnessed the growth, courage, and understanding that had unfolded within the small cabin. And though the future remained uncertain, both Joseph and Agnes felt prepared to face it, strengthened by their experiences and by the connection they had forged. As the night deepened, the cabin glowed warmly in the quiet darkness. Agnes felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she had found not only safety but also guidance, friendship, and the tools to face life with courage. Joseph felt a quiet pride, knowing that his presence had helped someone discover their strength, and that together they had found hope in the mountains. And so, the mountains held their quiet watch, offering shelter, lessons, and the promise of new beginnings. Agnes and Joseph had faced fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for the days ahead. In the quiet embrace of the mountains, they had found what many spend a lifetime seeking: courage, connection, and the belief that life, no matter how challenging, could also be full of hope, peace, and possibility.